Welcome to the Gottesdienst crowd, where we foster confessional integrity, liturgical preservation, and preaching that doesn't stink. We believe that the historic liturgy of the divine service is more than mere cobwebs of antiquity, but it is a true treasure of the Church, to be dusted off and brought down from her attic to be enjoyed. So let's get dusting.
Welcome back to the Gottesdienst crowd. This is Jason Braaten, your host. Today we have with us, for the first time, a special guest, Pastor Mark Preus. He is the pastor at St. Andrew's Lutheran Church in Laramie, Wyoming. Welcome for the first time, Mark.
Thanks, Jason. It's good to be here.
It's good to have you. Well, Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Happy Epiphany. We need it.
That's right. So you gave a sectional at last year's Bugenhagen conference that I was unable to attend, and it was on kind of modern idols or the gods of our culture. And I assume that when you're using the word gods, it's plural for a reason. So hopefully we can spend some time, if not in one episode, a couple episodes, looking at in your position as a pastor of a church, but also an outreach to the University of Wyoming campus and the campus ministry there, what you see as kind of the idols of our day. So why don't you kind of introduce your sectional and what you have in mind and take us through.
Okay. I think it begins with our small catechism, the first commandment, you shall have no other gods before me. And the meaning is we should fear, love, and trust in God above all things. And if you look at the large catechism, a beautiful book in its entirety, but especially the first commandment, whatever you fear, love, and trust in the most is your God. Whatever you consider to be most precious in your life, whatever you rely on the most, whatever you're most afraid of, what you expect the most good from, that is your God. And these words have helped me since I was a little boy, but they especially helped me in college and since then in kind of debating the secular culture, in that, I learned all the philosophical arguments about the existence of God. And it was finally, even though I would win some of these arguments, or at least in my mind I did, it finally didn't really matter, because the minute that somebody believes in or says that, yeah, okay, I believe there is a God, because that has become more popular at times. People want to say they're agnostic and not atheist. They'll just say, I just can't say anything about him. And I thought that was pretty honest. And the minute that somebody believes that there is a God, that God is an idol already. Because the problem is not that God, that natural revelation, or what is often called the natural knowledge of God. It's not that God did not fully reveal himself, or that he inadequately revealed himself to man, or reveals himself to man still to this day. I think Romans 1 makes that clear. It is that man's heart is corrupted. And the heart, if we look at it in the biblical sense, is not just the emotion, but the mind, the thoughts of the hearts. And so there we have our fears and our loves and our trusts. We have all of man in his soul described in the first commandment, and the meaning of the first commandment, fear, loving, and trusting in God. And so I couldn't help but notice when I was getting my master's in classics, and I had noticed it before, that the pagan gods of the Greco-Roman world very simply matched people's fears, loves, and trusts. So I'll give you a couple of examples.
Yeah.
First, you have imagine that your slave. This is 3,000 years ago, and you're in Greece, and your slave up ahead is plowing, and you're behind him sowing seed, and all of a sudden a lightning bolt comes from the sky and just kills your slave. You're going to be afraid. Why in the world did that happen? You're not going to say, well, there's some scientific explanation for this. Epicurus didn't come around for another 700 years. Epicurus thought that there's a natural explanation for everything, and moderns like Karl Marx studied Epicurus. They're a materialist way of thinking. They were spiritual. Man was made for God, and so what do? You're afraid of whatever power it is that you can't understand, and so you go to the temple of Zeus, the thunder god, and you go and you sacrifice an ox, and you go to that temple and you make a sacrifice because you think that maybe he's mad at you or that he needs to be appeased, right? Because the weather, you can't predict it. Even to this day, weather predictions are pretty ridiculous, especially in Laramie, Wyoming. And so people fear the weather. And it's interesting, in many cultures, the weather god was also a fertility god because he brought the rain. But this god who rules over the heavens in Greco-Roman mythology, Zeus or Jupiter was given the heavens, and Poseidon was given the sea, and Hades was given the underworld, and then they all kind of divvied up or duked it out on Earth. And that the greatest god was given this fear. Great temples were built to Zeus and statues of him, and tons of sacrifices. The economy kind of ran around it. Now let's compare that to today. We, in our so-called enlightened era, people are terrified of the weather. In fact, people think that, and they teach that if we don't sacrifice our economy, then we will see punishment from the heavens because we have done harm to the earth, and we have polluted the heavens with our selfishness, selfish progress. And if we don't sacrifice jobs and even children, because there are too many people on the world, then the gods will be angry. Now, they don't say the gods, but it is the gods because it is fears, loves, and trusts. I had a friend that I knew from Germany, and when I was in high school, and she had been a Christian, but she then became totally radicalized and leftist thought. And she posted back when I was on Facebook. She posted, I posted something about global warming, and it just we don't need to be afraid of it, something like that. And she's basically preached to me doom and gloom about what's going to happen to my children and all this other stuff. Very religious, Yeah. And so secularism
is a myth.
Is the myth. Yeah. Like my brother Christian wrote in the first edition of Christian Culture. But we've all recognized this. There's no such thing as some enlightened tabula rasa or objective, non-biased way of looking at the world. There will always be not just religious impulses, but religious structure, religious dogma. And you see that today, and it didn't disappear. It's right there. They just hide it under the guise of science or whatever. But this is the thing that the scientists have always done,
So you're saying, like, in the ancient world, when St. Paul is talking about idolatry, there isn't anyone that he's talking to that wouldn't immediately understand that they were an idolater.
Yeah, that's exact. People recognize.
But now we still have idols, but we just don't know that we have them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, we're in dark. The greatest thing about the Enlightenment is that it just darkens people, right? I call it the endarkenment among my parishioners. Because they're blind to, because they only look at the material and they think that the light of reason, even to this day, even though rationalism is dead and gone for any moral purpose, it's still not moral purpose. It's still used for moral purposes, but for any all-encompassing explanation of things, people will try. They think that they're not spiritual, or that they're not religious. So some of the most religious people I know are I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, because religious. Well, Cicero talks about what it means, but generally, it's etymology to bind something to, or to bind down or to bind back. is how people view religion today, and that it is restrictive and all of these other things. But can you find anything more restrictive than to say that, hey, you can't drive a car because the gods are, the heavens are going to rain down, vengeance, and the seas are going to rise. And I mean, then they bring Poseidon into it, and so the god of the sea. So yeah, they're unaware. They're unaware of their own blindness. And this is exactly what Paul describes in Romans 1. It's professing to become wise, they became fools,
Right.
And it's precisely, and they change the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. Now, this is always where it seems like, oh, so this doesn't apply to our modern day because we don't have these idols of these images of corruptible man and birds and four-footed
right.
animals and creeping things, but we actually do. It's man is the highest good. Man needs to be like the ideal of man, that he can live a fulfilled life. That is more important than babies, right? Yeah. And then animals, all this animal, this worship of animals. We have people calling themselves dads and moms when they have animals, and they're worshiping them. They're worshiping them and expecting their highest good from them because they don't have it from God and they don't have it from men. So they're in professing to be wise. We have science on our side. If you don't obey us, then this doom and gloom will happen. They don't even recognize. They don't recognize what they're doing, and we've seen this especially with COVID. As if we haven't dealt with sickness before. Even if you were to believe these outrageous numbers, like 800 or 900,000 people dying from COVID, give me a break. We all know that this isn't so if we could just use our reason. But even if it were so, it still wouldn't be as bad as the Spanish flu. It still wouldn't be as bad as many other things that we have faced in the past. And there we see that finally those who rule over these religions, what do they finally strive for? What do they finally want? They want power. And that's what they get. Consider the ziggurats of the ancient Near East and Ur and Uruk and other places like that. You have these pyramids that have these steps, going up. And the only people who can ascend to the top of them are the priests. You can't know. You can ask. I saw an interview with this guy, some British guy, and there's some global warming fanatic, so-called journalist, and who's promoting this anthropogenic global warming stuff. And the guy says, "So how much of the atmosphere is made up of carbon?" And she doesn't know. and then or CO2, and she doesn't know. He's like, well, he tells her, and then it's this much, it's this much, it's this much. So you're asking for Australia, I think it was, to sacrifice this much of its economy for the sake of this. And she didn't know, but what was her reply? Well, I'm not a scientist, but the 99% of scientists say this. Well, she doesn't know. She can't rise to the top of the ziggurat.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? Now, a more brutal way is the Aztecs or the Mayans, who the only two kinds of people who go to the top of that ziggurat are the priests and those whose heads roll down those steps, right? And it is that they will always sacrifice people for the sake of this so-called knowledge, for the sake of this religion. And they have devotees who they are enslaved by this, and this brings us to the other point. Like, this is kind of the connection that we need to make. Moses and Paul say that these idols that they worship they sacrifice these things to demons, right?
Yeah.
Why? Because the false doctrine is from demons. False doctrines support or demons support false doctrine, just like the devil is the father of lies, right? So you can see this more clearly in today, even in that all you got is the doctrine. And this was my question to my parishioners. I said, last year, I said, who stopped the gospel from being preached and the sacraments from being administered to poor sinners who needed it?
The church did.
Well, yeah, the church. Well, the devil did.
Yeah.
By teaching false doctrine,
Yeah.
by teaching them to fear what could destroy the body more than him who could cast both body and soul into hell.
Yeah.
And I said that true doctrine is one sin is worth more is worse than COVID, right? Feeling a greedy thought in your heart is worse than all that COVID could do. Glancing in lust at a woman is worse than all that COVID could do. It's a doctrinal matter. Who would teach you that there's something worse than sin?
Mm-hmm.
Who would teach you that death of the body is worse than being cast both body and soul into hell? Only the devil. And so we are, but people are blind, and it's like, because it isn't an official religion, but hides under this mask of science, they get away with it. And we need to recognize it through the doctrine,
Yeah.
And but the devil hides himself. It's very
Well, it's like that quote from The Usual Suspects, isn't it? The greatest trick the devil ever played was convincing the world that he didn't exist.
Yeah, that's C.S. Lewis too. Yeah, it's like in the Screwtape Letters, he says something like that. Yeah, I mean, it's just not. If you want your enemy to really go crazy, do things to him that he doesn't know you do.
Yeah.
Like you can drive somebody absolutely bonkers that way, and that's what the devil does. He's madness. He's insanity, and that's why for a long time, my brother David has called this age the age of absurdity, right? So you go philosophically, you go to Descartes and let's just see what I can know without the scriptures, and he gets to, I think, therefore I am, which is an interesting thing because he means it, he doesn't mean it ontologically, but epistemologically. That is, I know that I am because I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like by itself, it's incomplete. I don't exist because I think.
Right.
That's stupid. You can't think yourself into existence. Then you're God. But that's precisely what it means, And so what have we gone to? Now we think ourselves into whatever we are. Even though the evidence is that I'm a man, I can just say I'm a woman. I can do anything. And then if anybody opposes it, who are the great defenders? Who are the great defenders of this absurdity and this insanity? It's those who control the fears and loves and trusts of people.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very good at inspiring fear. How many of us have refrained from just looking in a disgusted way at two lesbians or two homos being gross because we don't want, we don't want the backlash. What are they going to do to us? And so they hold the hearts, the fears, the loves, and the trusts. And, people go for government. Yeah, this is obviously the devil showed Jesus all the kingdoms of the world and said, all this is yours. It has been delivered to me.
Yeah.
And so we should have known that already. But that's just, that's the basic framework of what we're dealing with. We have other gods too that correspond from ancient times. Like the obvious one obvious one would be Venus. In Corinth, you had, I think, 2 or maybe 3, I forget what it was, temples to Aphrodite. And we're talking prostitution. Like they estimated 100,000 prostitutes in Corinth and child prostitutes, men, women, whatever. And they sanctify it. And this is kind of what Caberly talks about in his Quest for Holiness, which every pastor, I think, should read. But that man is always trying to sanctify his most bestial and basest instincts. And guess what? We got a power to do it. We have authority to do it. It's like, do you believe in gay or do you believe in gay marriage? Or it doesn't exist. Well,
Correct.
why are you like, so you made a law? Can you say that water doesn't wet us and fire doesn't burn? Can you say that the sky is falling? You know what I mean? Like it's just so absurd.
Yeah, it is a rejection of the law of non-contradiction.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. But this is the point though. what is a God? What is a false God? It's believing in something that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? It's trusting in something that should not be trusted in. It's loving something that does not love you back. It's relying on, it's fearing something that can't harm you, Yeah. And it doesn't exist. At the heart, idolatry is self-contradiction because it's not there. We're believing in a dream, and that's why David says in that very day, his thoughts perish when he dies, all of his plans are gone because that's what death does. And that's why the day you eat of it, you will surely die because there is no life in something that doesn't exist. So, but there is condemnation with the devil for those who follow it.
So are the modern or the gods of our age any different from the gods that St. Paul faced when he lived and preached the gospel to the pagans?
I think we've already gone over the biggest differences, that they're hidden and that people don't get it.
But it's the same stuff.
Besides that, no, they're numerous gods. A good, what might be good for us in understanding this is the Hindus. My brother and I were in Boulder. My brother David and I were in Boulder this past weekend for a herring barrel, a young adult retreat. And we had like over 50 young adults there. And one guy even proposed to his girlfriend. It was kind of nice. We're trying to get these Lutherans together, And, but anyway, I went with my brother and my Aunt Solveig and then my brother's son to an Indian restaurant and had really good lamb korma. It was delicious. And as we were walking out, we walked out a different way that we came in, and we saw that elephant Hindu god.
Vishnu.
Yeah, Vishnu. And there it was a statue, and there was a little incense thing with a bunch of matches there, and they would go and burn incense.
And you immediately thought of Abu from The Simpsons, right?
Yeah. Thank you. Come again.
Please do not be feeding peanuts to my God.
That was a good impression. Please, peanuts to my God. I was in another Indian restaurant it was in Fort Wayne, and I saw two pictures, two portraits of an older man and a younger man. And I said to the guy as I was checking out, I said, is that a relative? He said, no, that's my God. And I said, oh, well, he looks older in that picture than he does in this picture. And he said, oh yes, he's dead. And I'm just like, okay, Nietzsche didn't even you're totally cool with what Nietzsche said. I gotcha. God is dead. Like it's anybody who gives you, so you have this basic life force and then it manifests itself in some panentheistic way. And then you get to choose how to connect to the life force, and this is totally taken over the United States, paganism, neo-paganism. We're already neo-pagans, but a lot of people, like in Laramie, I've met tons of Norse pagans. I've met people who actually do worship these gods, or they
like
in
Thor
some way.
And Odin.
Oh yeah. And it has to. It's always, what it is too. Is it's a moral thing for the Norse pagans. They talk about how people are. They make talking points that Christians make. Like families are destroyed. There's no loyalty anymore. They're often very anti-feminist because they want the strength of man to be appreciated again. Mm-hmm. And I knew a man who he had 2 wives. Now they're obviously not officially married, but they don't really care about the government so much. But he had 2 wives, and he said, I have it's about loyalty and family and taking care of other people, and he worked 2 jobs to support these 2 wives. Well, then these two wives of his, one day he comes back home and they're gone, and they've joined his best friend. So there went his Norse paganism out the window. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's they don't have he trusted in these gods to give him strength. And he wouldn't even argue about, whether they actually existed. He said that they worked. It was kind of like a Roman way of thinking. Well, it worked. It's a manifestation of some chaotic and misunderstood God or force that's out there. I've met people too among the college students who worship Saturn, and other things like that. And And you have also, like, if you look at the Greek Theogony, I really recommend the book Hesiod's Theogony. Hesiod was about the same age as Homer, and he wrote two works, Works and Days, and then Theogony. And the Theogony has more mythology, but it's the birth of the gods, and it's so hilarious. I mean, it's basically you see evolution. So you got chaos, right? And then you have three things that come out of chaos, just spontaneous generation. It is Earth, and then Tartaron, or Tartarus, which is hell. Yeah. And then Eros, which is sex, right? So Earth, hell, and sex arise out of chaos, right? And all the other gods, Greek gods, have these as their progenitors, right? So this is, if you look at how people view the powers that they can't understand in life, right? People are always blaming God. You know what I mean? And they're blaming God. That's hell, right? Why are these things happening? There's some evil inferno. This is the greatest. The greatest powers that are the earth, sex, and hell. And so you have this earth worship, and you see this especially out here in the Mountain West, where everybody worships the earth. They love their skiing and their mountain biking and their camping and all this other stuff, and this is their church, it's very interesting. Well, then Earth gives birth to heaven, right? Uranos, and that's interesting because this makes sense because anything spiritual comes from man. So for the spiritual comes from the material, and that's all that man can understand. And then you have they then have sex, right? And this is the spiritualization of the carnal, and then everything arises from this, and it's a disgusting story. But basically, you get Kronos. Uranos, he buries his children in the earth because he feared and loathed them. So heaven is afraid of man, and then his son Kronos
eats them. Doesn't he eat them?
No, his son Kronos eats his kids, but Kronos first castrates heaven. He castrates his dad. His mom, the earth, gave him a sickle. And he castrates his dad, which is also where one of the stories of where Venus comes from, which is gross. But it's just disgusting, But you have this son hatred of the father, like there is nothing to sanctify. There's no primordial example to sanctify our human relations. Nothing. It's not sanctified. It's all a mess. Even when Zeus finally defeats Kronos, and frees the 100-handers and goes after the Titans. Yeah. Juno is a jealous wife, and Zeus is just a fornicator. So there isn't any example of good of honor thy father and thy mother. Right. But that being said, man is like an afterthought, and is not. It's basically so that man can serve the gods, and do what the lesser gods don't want to do. So you have, but they're not integral. They're not necessary for anything. Man is not necessary for anything except for the adventures that man himself chooses. And this is evolution. You have chaos. You have some big bang, and you have chaos, and then Earth and the heavens arise. And there's, Earth has some special relationship with the heavens, so that it actually is verdant and fertile and has life, right? And then eventually, man comes about by means of what? I mean, well, there's some sort of God called sex out there making things happen. I don't know. Where'd life come from? You just see, it's already materialism at its core. And any spirituality that's in it is just, envy, lust, greed, hatred, murder, all of the base things of man, because they have to come up with an excuse for it. And they blame the gods. They blame the gods for these things. And every now and then, they'll still eventually, they'll still, I think it's through Christian influence actually, and others things where they'll say, hey, yeah, the gods are, they're pious, they're good. You already have that in Hesiod that the gods are going to punish you if you do evil. But the gods can do evil if they want to, so there's kind of a determinism. It's kind of crazy. And that's also evolution, right? Why did you fornicate? You and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals, this is the way, this is the way I was evolved. It's determined. Sorry to quote that song, but it's determined. So you have a lot of people just excusing themselves with determinism. And that's paganism. It's not, I think it's good to study the classics because it puts into pictorial form how we are today, but which is helpful because people can hide, they can hide their paganism under the guise of science. And that just means that we need to be more and more studious. We need to be clearer and clearer in the way that we argue with the world, and bolder as well, so that we just, if we were in some great city and we saw somebody, a bunch of people saw you and me heal a guy of cancer right in front of their faces, so that his face was no longer haggard and gray and shriveled, but and whatever, we would get a mob around us. And they may not put a wreath on us and call us Zeus and Hermes, but they would want to make us, they would look at us as some sort of conduit to God, and but God doesn't give that now. I think it's interesting. God didn't do many miracles in his hometown because of their unbelief, and that's what we have today.
So where should we argue against the world?
Well, I think first of all, we need to argue against the world by arguing against our own flesh, and with the pure doctrine. That is that we cannot be conformed to the world, but we need to be renewed. But we need to be renewed in our minds by the pure doctrine. And this means that the first place we fight in the world is against any cowards in our midst, against any traitors in our midst. And that means we go after, like, I'll give you an example. If we find out that there is a church that is, I don't know if you can tell me what you think about this. I'm kind of just, we need to deal with this. Okay. And everybody's like, you got to go through synod. Okay. How long does it take the synod to cast a heretic out? Okay.
Yeah.
And people have this argument that you have to commune somebody until the synod determines it. This is just absolutely absurd and idolatrous. Once you know that a man teaches false doctrine, then you mark and avoid him, period. You don't need to wait for a human voice to do what the divine voice tells you to do. But churches that have given into the fear, and pastors that are still that any pastor who requires face masks, unless it is because unless he is actively fighting against it and dealing it. You can't do it. You can't require face masks. It's against the law of God. It's immoral. It is child abuse to put masks on children. You are perpetuating the fear. You are not fighting with us. You are worshiping a false God. Why are you fearing this? Why are you fearing? You fear this more than you love to praise God. Sing unto the Lord a new song. He wants to hear, now thank we all our God. Not, you know what I mean? It's just, who would dare, what kind of people would dare to do this unless they had another God that they were worshiping? Or that, well, we need to love people, and so we're gonna stop preaching the gospel and ministering the sacraments. What definition of love could possibly, what Christian definition of love could possibly tolerate such a thing? Only a heretic, only a craven, cowardly heretic would do such a thing. And I think that it is judgment begins with the house of God. So we need to repent of our own sins, and in a spirit of fear and trembling, rebuke these people. And those who sin, rebuke before all, that others may fear. They need to fear God. You should fear God. How many times have I had to, man, I just don't feel like writing right now. Well, you better do it because God tells you to, It reminds me of, these pastors remind me of this story that this old German pastor told my dad. I wish I'd grown up in that time, where you could talk to the old German pastors, who came off the boat and stuff.
Yeah.
And this old German pastor was telling a story about this vicar he had. And it was Sunday morning and they were in the sacristy and he wasn't coming out to the pulpit. And so he goes in there, he says, "You must preach." And he said, I can't. And he said, it does not matter. You must preach. And he goes, I can't. And he says, "You will preach." And then my dad said, "What did he do?" And the old German said, "He shat himself." And that's how these people are. It's like, I can't do it. Like, you're going to, at the end of the story is you soiling yourself with your own filth. Okay. Because there's nothing that can take that filth away but the word of God. And then you go and say, they're worshiping a false God. Well, which idol is it? I don't know. I think its name is COVID. Like what? No, thou shalt not worship COVID. Well, I don't worship him. Yes, you do. You fear him. You fear him more than anything else. You fear him so much that you won't even hear the true God. Do you see what I mean? So Judgment begins in the house of God. And I don't know. I think that we should get a thing going, but and then all these, and have an overture. Maybe I'll try it just one last time, have an overture and then see it omnibus and all this stuff. We need to call people out and accuse them until they take us into whatever. You can't even charge people with false doctrine anymore. You have to go through some dispute resolution process. But, these cowards say, stop it. Stop cowering. Well, you need to convince people. It's like even these conservatives are church growth at heart, because it's like, well, we need, we can't inhibit the Holy Spirit. How about you just speak the word of God?
Right.
And God will call his elect, But it's like, oh, there is no God out there. There is no God that they're worshiping. This is science. This is reasonable. Prove to me. Give me the data. I don't need to give you any data. I don't need to give you a single shred of data. I can just simply tell you that you are not worshiping the true God when you avoid the preaching of his word and the administration of his sacraments, and you stop it. It's like evolution. I don't need to argue with you about evolution. This is a stupid idea. It's just ridiculous. You're telling me that we can think and move and breathe and have our being and procreate because and know right and wrong because of genetic mutations? That's stupid. I don't even need to talk about it. I don't need to go get a bunch of facts. I mean, it's fun to get the facts. It's great to worship God and look at what he's done. But it's like, why should we speak in their terms at all? Yeah. And you have these weak, craven pastors. I just want to line them up, put them in the stocks and have children throw rotten vegetables at them. They should all be publicly defrocked and then we can all take over their churches, and help them, because it'd be better to have a pure teacher who comes twice a month than a false teacher who isn't even opening his churches yet, right. and that nobody in authority, John Hill would. He's got authority. He would rebuke a pastor who did this, but none of the synodical leaders have told people, have said this is wrong. I would immediately move. We don't need to talk about this. You want to do online communion? It's not just wrong because it's stupid and Jesus didn't do that. And what the heck? It's wrong. It's wrong because you are giving into the fear of this God named COVID. Mm-hmm. You're giving into it. There is a science. They have the priests of science, and you can't get to the top of the ziggurat. You can't. Yeah. You can't get to the top of the ziggurat. They will hide it with what, like Oz. They will hide it with all sorts of rituals and things and threats. And you're not smart enough. Well, you know what though? A 7-year-old boy can rebuke me for false doctrine and the Christian church because he enters into the Holy of Holies and he has the scriptures. Mm-hmm. We have renounced the hidden things of darkness. This is the Bible is clear about this stuff. And then you look at Canada, it's so sad. These Canadians, it's like they are ruled by the devil. And they defend wearing face masks, and not just wearing face masks in church, but canceling services because of the Omicron virus. I mean, who could be deluding them but demons and the devil himself? This isn't science. It's just absolutely, it's absurd. So, but evil.
So we start by rebuking the world in our midst, like within the household of God itself.
We start by rebuking ourselves.
Yeah.
Let anyone, considering yourselves, lest you also be tempted. We never rebuke a brother without considering ourselves. And so we consider ourselves, how have we, what gods have we worshipped? Is it greed or lust, or, is it mammon or violence and hatred and grudges, the god of war or sex or whatever it is, We need to rebuke that in our lives and pray God to deliver us. This is what Ezekiel says, when he says he will sprinkle clean water. I will sprinkle clean water on you, and from all your idols I will cleanse you, because they make you dirty, And he says, I will gather you from all the nations. I will sanctify, I will separate you from the world. That's what baptism does. I just preached this to a bunch of kids down in Boulder. What separates us from the world? Repentance into baptism, into Christ. Only he can deliver us from these false gods, because we are in the danger. Even if we have all the facts, we're not going to be able to convince a single person. These gods are more powerful than us. What everybody's despairing because reason isn't working. It's like, yeah, no kidding. Do you ever think reason ever worked? Do you think it ever worked to create anything holy or good? We're Lutherans, for Pete's sake,
Yeah, there is there's an idol for you, being reasonable.
Yeah.
Or desiring the world to see you as reasonable.
Yep. Yes. And a lot of those in our midst hide behind that so that they don't have to die on any hill. They don't have to fight any battle. What am I going to do? There's it's just like weak knees, and there's so much in the Bible that teaches us this. So first we need to, but I think that in facing those among us, we need to make a distinction between the weak and the wicked. Any teacher who doubles down, and defends any of this stuff, any restrictions on churches at all, is our enemy, is a Pharisee. And we talk to them like Jesus talked to the Pharisees. We do not talk. I don't care if you, so go, fine, go, I'll talk to him brother to brother. And if he doubles down, triples down, go tell it to the church. I'll tell it to my brothers. I don't need to go through the synod. How the heck am I supposed to do that when the synod itself hasn't said anything? They're just waiting back and just waiting for things to go away, putting their heads in the sand. And this is where, as far as how are we going to fight? How are we supposed to take one step against the world? Obviously we will when it comes to us, when we ourselves are divided and can't stand, in a proper phalanx, and help our brothers next to us. If we can't learn to fight as brothers, and we're not going to be able to fight as brothers when you got 7 craven men next to you, that's why Gideon said, anybody who is fearful hearted, go home,
Yeah.
And then even then, he only took the guys who lapped up water like a dog. Only the fools, and the things that were despised he chose to bring to nothing the things that are. And so we have to be willing to lose the respect of, the reasonable people. We have to be willing to be called, he's a little bit out there, And they'll say all sorts of things, he's got a bit of a temper, he's a bit rash or a bit this or that. It's like, listen, for the sake of the weak, I'm going to be as gentle as possible. And I make mistakes like that sometimes, but man, pastors, no. There's nothing that I say to you is going to be as bad as what God says to you on the last day if you continue to refuse to preach his word and administer his sacraments and sing praises to God and by example lead these people not to be afraid of this God called COVID. So that's anyway. But you see, this is kind of like, what is COVID? COVID is why does COVID get the name at which every knee shall bow? Why does COVID get this name? What is Omicron? Omicron is a bad cold. Maybe the original COVID wasn't. Maybe. I don't know. I seriously don't know, because there have been so many lies floated around. I don't know what the numbers are, but I do know that Omicron, by now, it's just, we have been way too patient, and this is just a cold, and pushing vaccines on people. I mean, it's just so absurd. I just heard this thing. Sotomayor says that there's 100,000 kids suffering from COVID in hospitals, right? This is totally not true. She's a justice of the Supreme Court, right? So this guy on Fox asked this lady from, I think, the CDC, what's going on, and she said, well, I do know that there are, this many thousands of children in the hospitals, and they're all unvaccinated, and they need to be vaccinated. And it's like, yeah, because kids aren't vaccinated. Mm-hmm. Like as if this, look at the people who are vaccinated. It doesn't matter. They just stick to that story. And despite all of reason, they're going to say, bow down and worship COVID. They will not back down until we say no. And this, I'm not speaking politically. I'm talking about the hearts of men, Yeah. I'm talking about our responsibility as pastors and as fathers to say, no, you may not do that. I have to judge. How can I sin against God by vaccinating my child? Mm-hmm. And it's this whole, like, a lot of Lutherans are retreating into this, well, it's everybody's opinion or something like that. Listen, if you're a pastor and you wear a mask, and you're not even, like, in front of your parishioners when you're not sick, you're asymptomatic, why are you spreading fear? I mean, at some point along the line, yeah, you go circumcise Timothy, but at some point along the line, you better not mutilate Titus. Right. It's just, how long do you wait until we have nobody? Until everybody has been conditioned and taught to bow down and worship and kneel to this God? We need Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to say no. It's just, but it's like, what is a God? If we can identify it as a God, then we start talking, why are people so afraid of this? And then we'll say, look at all these data, look at all this and this and that. No. You're looking at dogma. What does the Bible say? Yeah. What does he say? Like, he says that you should go and hear the word of God. What does the example of the church say? I mean, we are such disgusting, pathetic, weak Christians. If men risk their lives and their children's and their wives' lives to sneak in the middle of the night to go to church in Saudi Arabia, and then these people are like, I have a 0.098 chance of dying. You know what I mean? It's just disgusting. It's just absolutely filthy. It's dirty, and we need to be cleansed from the filth of these idols.
So we confess ourselves, cleanse ourselves from idolatry. We start with the household of God. Mm-hmm. Is there any argument to the world beyond that?
Yeah, but only as the church.
Yeah.
I mean, you're never, this is, I think, what's wrong. Like, people have this notion that you can, this kingdom of the left and kingdom of the right. So in the kingdom of the right, you worship God. In the kingdom of the left, you just worship whatever gods are ruling out there. So you can't say anything against sodomy in the workplace because the government said, wait, who would tell you that you can't speak against sodomy? Only the devil. Do you worship the devil? No. Do you renounce the devil and all his works and all his ways? Yes. Then go renounce them. Mm-hmm. Be a Christian. It's like when I remember these Lutherans, just awful, awful Lutherans who don't deserve the name. But, you got the ELCA now, so what are you going to do? Mm-hmm. But when that one county clerk, after the so-called same-sex marriage thing went through, that county clerk who refused to
down in Kentucky?
Yeah. I forgot what her name was. Anyway, and you have these people saying, well, she should resign because this is the government's job and da-da-da-da. It's like, are you serious? Are you're serious? If every single Christian county clerk refused to do this and they all got thrown in jail, that would have been the only thing that could have woken Americans up and that thought, whoa, These people are cruel. These people are cruel. And eventually, after after 1,500 or 2,000 of them, people would have been like, whoa, what's going on here? But nobody's going to do it. And then while they're standing there and getting all the heat, you get some stupid Lutheran going and saying, some libertarian or something saying, well, kingdom of the left, kingdom of the right. There's only one kingdom. God rules over it all. There's not a God in the civic sphere who is a true God. There's only one God, and his name is Jesus. He's King of kings and Lord of lords. And at his knee, every king shall bow. Be wise and instructed, you judges of the earth, and serve him with fear and kiss the Son, lest you be angry. Mm-hmm. This is how, or lest he be angry. This is how it has to be. We have to teach, as far as things in the world, you have to be willing to be persecuted so that everybody forsakes you. You have to follow Christ to the cross. Mm-hmm. That's what needs to happen. That's the only way that you're going to defeat the world. It's not through politics or anything. It's the only way. It's only through sacrifice. It's only through martyrdom. It's the only thing that will convince people. And that will also galvanize us, In the meantime, we'll see it. We'll see it. We've seen it. God has culled the flock in many ways and in many good ways through COVID. Those who are weak have shown themselves so, and we can let them back into the church. But man, I tell you, whoever pushed obeying the government's mandates during COVID should never, ever be allowed into leadership again. Ever. Mm-hmm. Ever. They can humbly live their lives and support those who did not bow to the idol.
Yeah.
But who's going to do that? These people are afraid of their elders and their deacons. They need to learn how to give them courage. How are they going to give them courage if they themselves if they fear men more than God,
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know what we're going to do. I don't know how it's going to work. I'm very grateful for a very pious and pious congregation. We got through this. I repented. I canceled church once. Well, for a day, because I had church the next day, but I canceled church once and I repented of it because it was wrong of me. Why should such fear stop church? And it's different from like, hey, if I don't cancel church, if there's a blizzard out and it's a foot of snow and there's no way that I'm even going to get to it, then I'm not fine. Okay. I understand that. Mm-hmm. But when there is a distinct God out there who is demanding your fear, demanding what belongs only to God, then we have to do everything contrary to what that God says.
Mm-hmm. Any final thoughts?
No, I kind of knew that we would talk about COVID eventually because
it's the idol of our day.
Yeah, this is the only time I'll ever use one of these stupid pronouns they use. She is a goddess. God with, I don't know, a godge. Maybe that's how they do it with these made up gender things,
Oh.
It's not he or she, it's a she. It's just a disgusting evil god.
Z.
And, yeah, Z or G or I don't know how it's pronounced. I don't know. It's but in any case, you have people are always going to be worship. They're always going to worship. They will never stop worshiping. You talk to an atheist and he's like, I don't believe in God. Well, you're just a blind fool. You don't see the gods that you worship. That's why, what does David say? They're corrupt. Their deeds are vile. They've done abominable iniquity. There's no one who does good. No, not one. Because the argument of an atheist isn't about whether a God could exist. It's about morality, and he's got tons of gods that he wants to keep and that he has loves and fears and trusts that he doesn't want to lose because he thinks that his imagined God is going to get rid of these other gods,
Yeah.
So you're always dealing with a religious person, and those who say that they're not religious are the most religious. They're the most demanding. They're the most cruel in enforcing their rules. Always. There's no exception. I've never seen an exception. They'll break off a friendship like that if you break a rule that they have laid down for their spirituality,
Yeah.
That's how they are. The so-called spiritual are the most religious. And so what we need to do is wake up to what are gods in our lives. I sing the Venite several times a week, and I really love for the Lord is a great God and a great King above all gods. And when I was a kid, I was like, why does the Bible talk about gods when they don't really exist? Yeah. But now I get it, and it is so comforting to me that Jesus is a great God and a great King above all gods. It's just wonderful.
Indeed. Thank you for your time, Mark, and hopefully we'll have you on again.
Yeah, I hope so too.
All right. Take care.
Okay, bye.